Good morning, afternoon now. We're short a few council members. I'm going to give them like 4 more minutes to 1:15, and then we'll just get started with the presentation if we don't have people here. Thank you. All right, with Councilmember Green here, I'm not going to delay any longer. Today is April 17th, also Holy Thursday for those who celebrate, 1 p.m. This is the Budget Committee. I'm here as the chair. Councilmember Green is here. Councilmember Harris as a guest member is here. I'll skip over item number 2 for right now till we get a quorum. Oh, here we go. I'll wait for Councilmember Thomas to be seated, and we'll get to item number 2. Thank you, Councilmember. I'll move for approval. All right, moved by approval of the Budget Committee meeting minutes, moved by Councilmember Green. I seconded. Hearing no nays, the three, it's fine. Yeah, the 3 yeas carry the motion. All right, next up is really what the meat of the meeting is about, which is update on the city's 2025 financial status. So I invite the administration to come make their presentation, please. Thank you. Here you go.
Who's doing the slide? Am I doing the slides?
I mean, the issue is, like, do it for this, you gotta do it for that, so.
No, it's
afternoon, Chairman Giarusso, members of the committee.
At the table is Brandy DeLarge, Budget Director, Gilbert Montano, CAO.
Leslie, how about do this? Come on.
Romy, would you like to introduce your staff and team?
Romy Samuel, Director of Finance, Rita Richardson Taylor, Deputy Director of Finance, Matthew Cooper, Chief Economist.
Okay, well, we will get started. Thank you for having us here today. I'm making sure the clicker's working. I don't think the clicker's working, so, okay, go ahead and go to the first slide. I'm going to just run through the presentation, and obviously we'll take any questions you'll have after. We've tried to make this presentation as thorough and fastidious as possible, so hopefully we've addressed many of the questions that I know the council has previously raised. So overall, overview of the city's financial position. 2024 financial data has finally been finalized following the reconciliation of revenues and expenditures. The unaudited 2024 actuals presented here today provide an updated snapshot of our current financial status. Though the situation is less dire than it appeared in February, the city must absolutely consider 2024 revenue shortfalls and budgetary risks and opportunities in 25 and 26. If 25 revenues do not exceed REC forecasts from September of 24, expenditures will need to be curtailed. To proactively address this, the administration plans to pursue one-time revenue opportunities, reoccurring revenue increases, and operational adjustments to limit expenditures. The updated data, along with the anticipated budgetary risk, underscore the need for fiscal discipline and operational flexibility as we navigate current and future political uncertainty, slow revenue growth, and rising demand for city services. We must affirm our commitments to protect the city's fund balance that is set aside for contingencies and develop a structurally balanced budget in 2026. Over the last 3 years, the administration has worked with the council to meet urgent needs while also protecting the city's emergency reserves. And you'll probably hear me reiterating the 3-year plan that we've always anticipated and planned, and the fluctuations until where we are now in 2026. So the city received $388 million in ARPA funds in 21 and 22. $194 million in Tranche 1 was deployed primarily to replace lost revenue, and $194 million in Tranche 2 funded dozens of important pandemic-related projects and initiatives. Having received such a large infusion of federal dollars in the midst of the Great Resignation, the city accumulated robust financial reserves, reaching $403 million at the end of 2022. In 22 and 23, the administration and the council deployed tens of millions of dollars and a fund balance dollar set aside for a $100 million emergency disaster fund, initiating an ambitious set of meaningful projects and initiatives in the community, investing in city assets and operations, and setting aside a prudent amount of emergency reserves to respond to future emergencies and protect long-term financial stability of the city.
Gilbert, can I stop you there for a second? So I just think it's important for us to take a step back, because I think in 2025 it's very easy to be like, this is where we are. Can you and Madam Director, CFO, paint a picture of how dire the circumstances were at the beginning of COVID, and then what the planning looked like, so as we emerge from COVID, we weren't in the same spot? Because I think that's been forgotten very easily, and I think it's a point that needs to be emphasized today.
Absolutely. Sorry, go and take the picture, because the flash gets me every time. Go ahead. All right. So the challenge of the pre-pandemic, well, we were running really strong in 2019, and then the pandemic hit, and we literally fell off a cliff. When the vast majority of your revenue is centralized in sales and hospitality and all the above, seeing that drop in revenue really put us in a very challenging and precarious situation. So much so that we, as you all were part at the table, we looked at, we did a COI, Certificate of Indebtedness, because we had no ability, or really, we had a challenge that we were even going to make payroll as a result of that deep decline in our revenue, coupled with, when we built that budget, there was about 21 days of furloughs we had to have for our employees. We were at almost drop dead zero as far as our ability to manage through that. So to your point, and Romy, feel free to jump in and pepper anything else you'd like, that was the hardest sled and one of the hardest hit cities financially in the entire country, even so much so that we had to take out a loan essentially to make payroll work, or potentially make payroll work through a COI, and furloughed employees for 20 days, which caused significant, and that included police and fire, just to make it pencil to be able to get there. I don't know if you wanted to add anything else.
And what year was that?
2020?
No, look, the reason why I'm raising this is because, I know we all are bounded by our experiences, but I remember vividly listening to the fact that before I was, I guess, budget chair, that we were in a precarious financial position, and I almost think to a degree collectively, because in this view, I think the city is the mayor and the council, we're being raked over the coals for being financially responsible now. And my hope is the next few slides too, and I know Councilmember Thomas has a point he wants to make, but that we can also demonstrate what that 3-year plan looks like, that has been a commitment, and also understanding that there isn't going to be a cash infusion like we have with COVID, so it means it's time to pivot to the next phase of the 3-year plan, which is the new one. Councilmember Thomas.
No, I was going to wait, but I think you set the table for maybe these questions. I was talking to Jim Singleton and some other elders who kind of did this budget stuff, and there were 3 questions that come to mind that maybe instead of waiting till the end, you could kind of infuse these questions into as you give your presentation, because I think it's important, especially given your question, Mr. Chairman. How has the city's revenue changed in the last couple of years? Especially for the layman and the citizens, it'd be good for them to know that. The other question is, what are our most volatile revenue streams right now, especially if the picture's changed? And then lastly, as you paint this picture, and I think you've been a real good financial steward, how do we compare to other cities, especially given the challenges people are seeing today and much of the lack of understanding, especially amongst folk who don't do this? So if you could kind of mix those 3 things, those 3 questions, I think that would help paint the picture, especially that our chairman has kind of opened the door with.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. And I'll try to weave that answer into all the questions, but they're very salient and important factors that I think are so important in this conversation, because we're reiterating that this is not just a 25 budget or a 26 budget. This has been a budget that we've been managing thoroughly since 2020, when we really fell off the cliff financially. And to your point, Councilmember Thomas, the volatility of sales tax and gross receipts tax and other hotel motel tax is fluctuating. We have a bad season, and that's going to affect our bottom line. There's less stabilization in those potential taxes as there would be, say, in hypothetically the property tax and the venues associated with there. And I also want to point out in the next couple of slides, and I thought it important because sometimes we get so tied myopically in the present snapshot. I really want to remind the public, the council, and all of the community how much of an investment that we've made with those one-time dollars. This is above and beyond what our baseline budgets would have been, and that's what slides 5 and 6 will provide.
Gilbert, can I just interject for 1 second too? I think, Councilmember Thomas, to your question, like the sales tax answer is what Gilbert gave. The other piece though too is costs rose after COVID, and I know you're getting to that, but I just want to say out loud, because I know it's later and I'm not trying to steal your thunder, but in 2020 or 2021, we ran something like a 600,000 deficit on sanitation, and I'm just like, because of no contracts or whatever. Now we're at a $30 million. I mean, that's a huge impact, and we're going to have to figure out a way to solve that. So like the twin problems we're sort of had is revenues get impacted because of sales tax, and how do we not rely so heavily on that? And at the same time, expenses have...
Mr. Chairman, perfect, because, and excuse me, I don't want to be out of order.
Yeah.
And I think that's a perfect segue into the picture, I think, especially with your opening that you're trying to paint. How were we able to do more with less, seemingly, before? And now we have more, right? Before Katrina, the city's budget was $500 million with 503,000 people. Now we have 40,000 fewer people in a budget that's quadruple what that budget used to be, and the public doesn't quite understand that. And there needs to be answers, or at least those questions need to be answered so they can understand how we can have such a larger budget and fewer services, and would they, only one-day garbage pickup, right? Smaller police department and fewer services as far as they're concerned.
Sure. And maybe I'll try to answer that question from my professional opinion. Having done this business almost 20 years, what city governments did 10, 15 years ago is profoundly different than what it does today. And I equate it to almost a thin layer of peanut butter in the sense where 10, 15 years ago, cities really did basic services, quality basic services. You had, public safety, you had streets, roads, you had all the smaller, important basic services. Where we are now, cities have evolved into doing a whole lot more. So there has been a lot, and they're all great stuff, and cities have stepped up in a lot of place for the state and the federal government to address many other issues that 10, 15 years ago I never saw in my budget prior to. And I think that's, they're important investments that are being made, but the pie is growing larger than actually the resources are. So there's almost a significant more amount of things the city does now and invests in now than it was 10, 15 years ago, from my recollection professionally. But thank you for the thought and the process, because I do get that question a lot of how do we get back to basic services? And some of the direct and frank answers is that we're doing a lot more than we ever have done. Not saying that or criticizing that, but the need for a city to step up and do different parts of things has certainly evolved. So sorry not to go down too much down that path, but on the next two slides, this was just really important for me and the team, and I know the council, to really reiterate and punctuate where some of these significant investments have gone. Now, this is investments that has been above and beyond the baseline. So on the first line, you see that the administration and the council invested almost $40 million into police. Now, that is above the baseline budget. That $40 million went to retention, that went to recruitment, that went to stabilizing the mass exodus that we saw overwhelmingly during several of those years. So that's almost $40 million that we put directly into police alone, just to make sure that we had and kept the officers and retained the ones we had and allowed a robust recruitment. Now, are we spiking the football on any of these items? Absolutely not. Can we always do better? Absolutely. But I do want to qualify that these investments have been thoughtful and significant. The $30 million that is profoundly going to overhaul the criminal justice technology platform. That thing was holding together with shoestrings. Now we're almost at the stage of completion where we're going to have one system that speaks to all criminal justice agencies that is going to last for a significantly long, intelligent amount of time. This is all behind the scenes items, but it matters when our officers are dealing with the courts or the judges. $52 million in investments for police renovations relative to their facilities. Equipment and facilities is not the most sexy thing to invest in for maybe a headline, but they are important to our public servants that go to work every day in environments that often can be challenging. So seeing almost $52 million, and we've listed some of the items that we've invested in. And I will reiterate, this is not a comprehensive list. This is just a snapshot of some of the items that the council and the administration invested in over the last several years to really hope to make a trajectory difference. $55 million in equipment and police cars, and I'm hoping everyone is seeing all the new police cars out there with all their bright lights and all the new trucks and equipment, lawnmowers, et cetera, out there. We have some work to do on the heavy equipment, but as far as the vehicular items, both for our operational departments and our public safety teams, I think it's been night and day. When we got here, cops were running hot seats, ambulances were running 24 hours at a time, and we were running them ragged. And so that investment, although once again significant, will make a difference for the future management of the city. I think that it was important for me to say, sewage and water boards are important for everybody. The city has provided them $183 million of support. Good investment because it's needed in floods, and we have a lot of relationship, and we both have to succeed together. But from our general fund, we've provided almost $183 million just to a sewage and water board, and I think that is significant amount of money that would go toward funding a separate agency outside of the city. Likewise, sure.
Sorry. Sewage and Water Board is technically a state entity. And to your point you made earlier, here is the city stepping into the fray and saying this is our problem. And this is not $10 million or $20 million. This is close to $200 million over 5 years. Now, I know sometimes it gives people heartburn, myself included, about giving them more money, but at the same time, we wouldn't have T7, which the mayor fought for, the new substation, other things that are happening, getting the power station stood up without making this type of investment. And also I think, Gilbert, it pushes back sometimes on the narrative that the ARPA money went sideways and not to infrastructure when you see this number over a 5-year period.
Absolutely. It's a big number. And likewise, and the external agencies, and they're listed there, everything from OPCD to the public defender to clerk of court, there's been an additional $106 million provided to those agencies above what their baseline budget was when we got here. So that's in addition to. So obviously those agencies, external agencies, were not properly funded to be able to execute the missions that they were called to do. It is the city that increased, almost without exception, every one of those agencies' budgets, and in an aggregate collectively over $100 million worth. Many of those are our state entities as well, but likewise the city saw the importance and the need, much like Sewage and Water Board, and invested them significantly. Super Bowl was, I think, a lauded success for everyone that was, at least from my interpretation and hearing from people, that cost us $60 million to be able. Now, those are long-standing investments that will benefit the community for years to come, but that came at a price tag to show off New Orleans the way that we did over Super Bowl. To be, we hope, catalytic, almost $23 million of investments for things like Charity Hospital, Six Flags, things that we have on the horizon that we should be excited for is also in there. The next item I think is important and a testament to where we place some of our values. Over the course of the last 8 years, we've increased wages for city employees by $111 million. That is significant. That is a large number, but it just shows you frankly, the lack of investment in as far as what employees were getting paid over the course of several years, that we would make a collective decision to invest in employees, especially during the Great Resignation period. And this is above what their baseline was, as I mentioned. This isn't total. This is just above $111 million. And of course, $11 million for workforce development also, because there's a lot of underemployment as we have in the city. And then lastly, the collective decision to invest the $133 million of emergency and reserve fund is also vital for us to highlight. So that represents almost $806 million, and this doesn't even it doesn't even anywhere near capture all the other investments. But yes, we could have put $800 million in a savings account and felt safe, but we would not have invested in all those important items. So I think it's important to highlight and show over the course of time where a lot of this money went and why it went there. Now to switch to the use of the city's fund balance. In recent years, the city has grown a historically strong fund balance in the general fund, and continuing to safeguard those reserves is a priority. I think we all are in collective agreement in that. In addition to deploying federal dollars and fund balance on investments, projects, and initiatives, the city has relied on fund balance through 2025 to maintain expenditure levels as reoccurring revenues collections recovered from the pandemic. However, over-reliance on fund balance must not continue into the future budget cycles, and I'll re-highlight that again. And I think that's something that we've always tried to highlight, that this year is the last year we can really rely on this fund balance to balance or close the gaps. We must match our reoccurring to reoccurring. Anticipation was to end it after this budget cycle, and obviously you'll see that as we build 2026's budget. In order to avoid, and this is, I wanted to put this in there as well, as we looked at one side of the equation of what we invested in, it's also what we foregoed. In the sense, this council, this administration chose not to raise taxes. And had we moved forward on rolling that millage forward, that would have provided an additional $30 million per year on top of our revenue. So over the course of 4 years in the next quadrennial assessment, it's $120 million of potential tax revenue we could have absorbed, but as an administration and a council, we realized that the public was not, nor should they be required to pay for some of these services in addition to their taxes. So we did not roll forward. We were the only entity, at least from my perspective, that did not roll forward in its entirety. So we did forego that significant amount, and I think it was the right decision. And then secondly, I always will remind the community and the group, when we came in 2018, the Board of Liquidation millage rate was 25.5 mils. Where we are now is 14.5 mils. That's almost a 10 mil swing in the amount of 7 years. Two major pieces. We didn't raise taxes. Our bonding capacity is now down to the 14.5 mils, and a mill represents about $5 or $6 million depending on homestead exemption, and still managed to make almost $806 million plus investments on things that are 10, 15-year projects, whether that's equipment or computers. So once again, I'll reiterate, 25 is the last year to be able to use our fund balance for non-emergency purpose.
I want to interrupt for 1 second because I think this deserves a finer point on it. If you look to where we were in 2018 to now, between not rolling all of the millages forward and rolling them back like we did, and I guess for 2020, and then what we did in 2024, we've saved the city close to $200 million. And then with the Board of Lick rolling back, it's tens of millions. So roughly the savings that taxpayers have seen is between $200 to $300 million over the last 8 years.
Yes, sir.
And then the second point, I think that's equally important for Board of Liquidation, the fact that the mills are so low actually gives the city incredible bonding capacity over the next few years to do more initiatives and more capital projects.
Absolutely, and you'll see that later on in the presentation on our recommendation. I know we've worked directly with you to address the entirety of the judgment list because of some of these financial decisions that were challenging on one side of the equation, but also beneficial frankly, in my opinion, in the long run. So I'll continue that. This is the last year to be able to use the fund balance for non-emergency uses, and we must maintain the $100 million emergency disaster fund and the $33 million savings fund currently budgeted. We do want to talk, and I think it's important, about a shifting financial environment. You know, despite the changing economic and political landscape, the administration is committed to protecting the city's fund balance that is set aside for contingencies and developing a structurally balanced 2026 budget. There's 4 aspects that we really wanted to highlight. Reduced revenue. 2024 actual revenues appear to have come in a little lower than forecast in some categories, resulting in further reliance to balance and support expenditures in 24. ARPA spend down. The city obligated all ARPA dollars by the deadline of 12/31, but spending will continue through 2026. And there's later in the presentation a graph that shows all the variations of these dollars. And I did want to highlight, in the presentation, I thought it important, we footnoted and we works cited where we showed facts and figures, so if anyone needs to go and look and validate or research, we wanted to make sure we put it our works cited page essentially on where the data came from. External risks. In 2025, we've already experienced some unanticipated expenditures, and the political landscape outside of the city's control increases revenue risk associated with federal, state funding and sales tax collections. And as I've mentioned, and you all have reiterated, the end of the city's 3-year plan to use the accumulated fund balance to augment recovering revenues with one-time post-COVID funding ends in 2025, reinforcing the need to maintain reserves for emergencies and disasters only. Now we're going to go into the financial data portion. We wanted to highlight the timeline of events and let you know kind of where we are with the data, the audit, the upcoming REC, and then obviously the state legislative session that we're watching very closely, which could have a dramatic impact on the city's bottom line if certain bills do pass. So the next slide is the actual 2024 financial data. Now, it's not the audited numbers, but this is as of April 7th. Is that right, Frida?
Yes.
April 7th. Okay, so unaudited 2024 data provided a meaningful snapshot of actual revenues and expenditures and resulting impacts on the city's fund balance. So we start on this chart. Our fund balance as of 12/31/23 was $326 million. Our revenue was $805 million currently. And our expenditures were $929 million. The unaudited fund balance after that turns into $202 million, $202 million, almost $203 million. And then the appropriation of fund balance in 2025 was $102 million. So the next line, the next three lines are important, and I think for clarity reasons, is that if we spend every dollar this entire year and everything comes to fruition on the revenue, we will end the year with about $100 million fund balance. That's right now. Now, that's not where we want to be. We want to be at $133 million. So what we're going to have to work towards collectively at the end of this month, this year, is fluctuating about $32 million to make sure that we close the year out with our committed $133 million.
But, I'm sorry, just so we're clear, though, the fund balance is $100 million, but we still have the $30 million in the rainy day fund. So technically, there's 133 that's there. I realize the 33.
No, technically it'll be 70.
Right.
So the 33, you're counting both the
Yes, within that 100 million.
within the 100 million.
Yes, sir.
both. Okay, just want to make sure that we're speaking, because what happens, just in my mind, is sometimes fund balance becomes a singular point, and sometimes it becomes a comprehensive one. So I want to make sure I understand.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we have the next set of parts to really try to make sure that we are right-sizing our budget to ensure that $133 million at the end of the year, which we're committed to do, and we will obviously maintain that. Next couple of charts I thought important just to show the variation of the last 3 years. It has not been standstill budgets, and it has not been carryover budgets in any sort of way because of the tumultuous nature of our economy, specifically New Orleans. So you'll see the bar graphs to kind of show the differences between the REC projections, and then more importantly, on slide 13, the comparison between the years 21 and 24. The thing I would highlight, though, is, we are back on 24, and you see that we have a much significantly low variance, which for us tells us we are not going to be fluctuating. We are at the point where we need to be, and now we have to capture our reoccurring to keep moving forward. I wanted to highlight at the last meeting there was we are working on our projections, and I'll give you the methodology of those thereafter. But there was a reported $42 million deficit in the police budget, and really wanted to highlight, as we unpacked those and dealt with the accruals, the actual police deficit budget for this year was $17 million. And that's something that we're working towards to address. But the reasons for that, as you'll see, the COPS grant reconciliation decreased it about $10 million, and a 2021 ARPA spending correction resulted in $15 million of prior costs being applied to the ledger, which was an accounting thing. I'm sure Frida could highlight it more if you have more questions on that. So at the end of the day, the operational deficit was not the $42 million as originally put into the projections, but actually $17 million. And that was driven significantly by overtime and unbudgeted consent decree civilian hires. So now personnel projections, overview and context for edification. The personnel projection model was enhanced for the 2025 budget year to maximize accuracy. The model is complex, and a more comprehensive assessment of the structure and methodology has been ongoing since the beginning of the year. Additional refinements are in progress and will be applied to the projections included in next monthly report to budget to council. As we transition from previously inflated vacancy savings to a more realistic personnel budget with vacancies eliminated, deficits are expected initially. Once improved projection methodologies and spending policies are fully evaluated and implemented, personnel budgets will be proactively adjusted to better match projected expenditures, reducing reliance on year-end savings. Personnel projections.
All right, Gilbert, can I stop you for 1 second? President Morrell has a question.
Sure.
Thank you. Can we go to slide on page 13? Look at the previous page.
Yes.
All right, where it says your unspent appropriations in 2023 versus 2024. In 2023, we had $149 million in unspent, and in 2023, you're estimating it's now $7 million. I want you to really dig down on that one for me, because it would make sense as we were growing money to put into the restricted section of the budget, that is why that unspent appropriation was there. But if that was in your calculation for 2023, why isn't that balance that we have, that's the unspent allocation, attributed to 2024? Other than that, or how we spent that tremendous amount of money in 1 year.
I think Brandy's going to
Brandy.
take
Yeah.
The 100 million appropriation, the whole 100 million savings, that was appropriated in 2023. That money was not appropriated in the budget for 2024. So these dollars, looking at appropriations by the budget, so that money is, I would say, in a fund balance, or however that's saved away, the finance can say where the money is sitting, but it's not part of our ordinance. So it was part of the ordinance for 2023. It was a public piece that we showed the public. We're putting that money away. It was in the Department of Finance. That money did not get reappropriated in the budget for 2024, so we would not see it here in this column.
I know, but it's interesting because when you further use the calculation on the far right of spent budget as amended, it creates the appearance that in this year we had turbocharged expenditures that I don't think the fact pattern you're giving me currently supports. So, I guess, first off, obviously in 21, 22, 23, we had the influx of federal dollars that we were appropriating in a variety of ways. But I guess for my purposes as a appropriating body, as the New Orleans City Council, what I'm looking at right now is the underlying expenditures without the turbocharge of federal money. So if we're continuing, it's kind of why we've had this fight over the last 3 years over reoccurring versus non-reoccurring expenditures.
Right.
The federal money is not a reoccurring expenditure.
Correct.
So when you look at the previous years of budget, because you're not differentiating between reoccurring and non-reoccurring, this paints a very odd picture because we're not looking at the underlying budget of revenue coming in and revenue going out and segregating out the federal money that's one-time money that is never going to come back again unless we have another pandemic, and see how much money we're actually pulling in, how much money we're actually spending, and what's the real budget. I know we really have this whole celebration for pages of how we spent the federal money, but it's all one-time money. I mean,
Yes.
if we're using the money, I mean, it's part of the argument that I had regarding how we handled retention bonuses, how we handled all these incentives, because they're not sustainable if they're all based on federal money. So I really need you to kind of explain to me ad nauseum, if we're going to have this historic budget trend and show these tremendous amounts of unspent allocations that somehow disappeared in 2024. I know that you, on a very technical level, have an explanation, but if I'm the public looking at that side, it looks like the city council and the mayor got drunk and went on a spending spree in 2024 when that is not actually the case. So take another hit at explaining why we had these tremendous unspent appropriations and why they no longer exist.
So, I don't know if I can be less technical, or Romy or Frida want to take a stab, but it's just not, the emergency fund is not represented in this particular 2024 variance. So that $133 million is part of the budget and part of our security, but it's not represented in 2024 because we know that we are not going to use or spend that, or we're going to end the year with it.
But using that logic, why is it in your unspent allocations, appropriations for previous years if the intent was never to spend it?
So for 21 and 22, some of that is the money that came in, the surplus that we had.
Right.
That money is actual money that was surplus from the pandemic, money that was for lost revenue, money we placed other places. This, again, is just general fund. In 2023, by way of the budget ordinance, there was $100 million added. So if we took that $100 million out, that would have been $49 million on that line for 2023. So we would have went from $90 million to $49 million, right? But us using appropriations, that was an appropriation, and we did not spend that money in the Department of Finance.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but what I'm saying is, with your explanation, it appears this slide looks more dire than it is my point.
So,
In that the previous years, you have 116, you have 90, you have 149, you have 7 here, but you also have the recognition that we now have this separate fund with $100 million in it that's not to be utilized. Technically, that's also an unspent appropriation, which would show this number of $7 million really being $107 million, which, when you're looking at a fact pattern, that actually tracks and makes sense. It's just, I'm always going to call out when I look at something like this, and it makes things, it seems like there was a fact pattern that was in these previous years that was suspended in this year to make this particular number look particularly bad when it's not that bad, is my point.
And-
In that the restricted fund exists. It's money the city has. We have chosen to restrict it, but it is an unspent, unallocated appropriation that's on our balance sheet. And if we're going to talk about looking at our previous year showing these rose-colored 116, 90, and 149,
The 133, the 33 million is not included in the 2021 line, the 2022 line, or the 2023 line. The only thing that is included on the 2023 line is the $100 million appropriation. So maybe we're getting caught up in what we mean by appropriation and what is being understood. For us, appropriation is what we had approved by the council. The 33 million is showing up on the fund balance slide on those numbers, but it's not showing up on this information here.
okay. So what you're saying is, we have created a new procedural loophole where since the council has not appropriated or acknowledged the rainy day fund as part of the budget, that is why it's not showing up here. It's basically...
I'm not saying that. You may be saying that. I'm not saying that. What I'm stating is, even before this time, I would like, maybe you can show me a year where someone had the 33 million of the savings fund included in the budget, even prior to this administration. It did not get appropriated. That money is there.
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that according to the 3-year plan, we have set aside money each year to create this fund that we now have. And
The
since...
savings plan is something by ordinance. So by ordinance, we have a certain percentage of the appropriated budget.
I hear you.
what we're-
And in our budget, we have chosen as a city, since this is our rainy day fund, this is our restricted fund balance, we're not going to consider that as part of the amount of money we're going to spend in any given budget year unless we have to tap it, correct?
right.
So-
And I'll say this, we're more than willing to work with you all on the presentation.
What?
And
I'm
what
just
we
saying-
want to represent or not.
What I'm saying is that if we have a ledger and we're trying to show this is how much money we have in the bank, this is how much money we've spent, if it's easier to track, if we have a checking account and it has $100 million left in it, and we choose not to allocate that money, the $100 million is still there, it's just unspent, correct? I get the technical explanation, which is that in a budget, we spent all this money, and this is the money that's not been spent. In that budget, we did not acknowledge the existence, whether it's by ordinance or not, we did not acknowledge the existence of the surplus because that is kind of our choice in how we're not going to spend it, because we don't want to put it on the balance book as something that's eligible, but it's still there. So maybe we need to look at in the future how we have maybe another category showing this is how much we're shoving away each year into the emergency fund or the savings fund, I think of it at 5%, correct? These presentations have to recognize the fact that if we're going to continue to have a goal of squirreling away 5% to go into that fund, we're growing that fund separately, but we're not acknowledging it on our budget sheet in a way that the public can track. Does that make, are we on the same page now?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And just so you know, we are working with council and finance and our consultants to develop a comprehensive fund balance policy that I think Councilmember Druso was wanting to sponsor. So I think that will even more clarify, I think, what your concern is now. Just wanted to highlight that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I had a question, and the chairman's gone. Just for people watching, so if my mother had budgeted $10,000 for the budget, and so my father was thinking there was $10,000 for the budget, but she backed out $2,000 for the rainy day, right? And so when they sat down next year, she said, they moved forward, he said, well, baby, there's $8,000, and he's saying, what happened to the $2,000? It doesn't mean the $2,000 isn't there, it's just been backed out into the rainy day family fund.
It's been moved to the savings.
It's been moved to the savings.
That's all we did, right? So basically, that 100 million, it was not appropriated in '24.
Right.
It's in your fund balance, it's just in
Yeah.
your other bank account that you're not touching.
So my mama didn't lose or mismanage the
She
money.
did not.
She didn't splurge on spending.
Correct,
It wasn't that new sofa set.
correct.
The money's there for the emergency or family rainy day.
That's right.
Oh, okay. It's just so the people can understand.
That's it.
And I think it's slide 16. Okay, thank you. So back to personnel projections. The source data, this is just a little bit more into the methodology. I know you all had asked the questions. So personnel transaction data for the general fund is exported from BRAS on a monthly basis, and the data includes payroll items, salary, overtime, taxes, benefit fringes, plus departmental specific terms, pensions, etc. Then there's the data integration piece where you have the current year expenditure data and prior year actual expenditures are loaded into this projection model, and then the year-to-date expenditures are totaled. The full year projections are calculated using a variety of projection techniques that is now below. So what we look at is the last full pay period. We use the most recent full pay period's cost multiplied by remaining periods for reoccurring costs. The average of the 2 to 4 recent pay periods averages multiple periods to smooth out irregular patterns or alternating payments. The period before the LFP, utilizing when the LFP includes one-off anomalies, such as terminal leave payouts, etc. And then we look at prior year actuals, apply historical expenditure data for seasonable or variable expenses, Mardi Gras, Jazz Fest, other one-time events. And then we look at other hard-coded estimates used for expenses that cannot be projected using standard methodologies above. So that kind of gives you a framework, and I'll go into a little bit more of our personnel projection methodology on the next slide. So what we plan to enhance is using the prior year data in place of the longer-term 3 to 5 year averages combined with the most recent actuals to capture seasonal trends and variable cost. Added projections for categories that previously only included actuals, improved pay period logic to account for partial pay periods at the beginning and end of the year, comprehensively evaluated and adjusted types of projection techniques used based on assessment of existing logic and historical trends. The current improvements we're looking to is shifting to a granular transaction data in lieu of aggregated data to improve reliability and allow for more targeted adjustments based on individual line items, loading full year versus monthly data into the model to ensure post-dated transactions are captured, auditing transactions and correcting distribution and classification errors, adjusting for additional one-time seasonal expenses not already accounted for, implementing regular audits and quality checks to ensure continued accuracy, and replacing existing Excel model with an automated Power BI model to reduce opportunities for error and provide real-time projection updates. So now the 2025 budget context. So that just goes into the methodology of our personnel projections, which I know is a question. While past trends point to potential remaining operating funds at the end of 2025, the 2025 budget process was more targeted than previous years, resulting in a leaner budget. As the city's 3-year plan to deploy its accumulated fund balance reserves comes to an end, the city worked to reduce expenditures in the budgets for 2025. The CAO's office coordinated with departments to review their budget submissions, reduce operating costs, and adjust personnel budgets to avoid budgeting for vacancies. As a result, actual spending in 2025 is expected to be more closely aligned with the adopted 2025 budget as compared to previous years. Nevertheless, it's impossible it's still possible that the actual 2025 revenues could exceed the official REC forecast due to Super Bowl, and certain projects may not be fully implemented due to circumstances out of the city's control, which could lead to some appropriations going unspent, mostly on the other operating side. So in short, forecast budgets and actual revenues and expenditures may continue to evolve, as we've seen in 2025, depending on the circumstances, but we're certainly not banking on the waves that we've seen in years past. The next portion is something we wanted to highlight, and some of this will be from previous conversations, something to think about potential revenue loss and challenges both at the state and federal level. In addition to the revenue loss and additional expenses below, tourism impacts due to the January 1st terrorist attack and reduced access to Bourbon Street during Super Bowl may have impacts on revenue. We go into the traffic camera fines, Emperor's dissolution payment, and then an increase to the fire pension cost depending on the outcome of the CEA, and an additional amount for NOMers. Other future revenue costs, changes to state law initiated by the Republican supermajority in Louisiana legislature could impact revenue streams. The 2025 regular session, fiscal session, began Monday, April 14th, and additionally, the Constitutional Convention later in the year could result in future revenue losses. So we're watching these several bills, the inventory, which could have a revenue impact of almost $30 million, prescription drugs, $11.7 million, food for home consumption, $9.5 million, tax sales, $3.7 million, soap, $3.3, MM&E exemption, $3.9. All of these are being watched closely at the state and will have a significant impact on the city should they pass.
Gilbert, can I stop you for a second? So I just want to make sure I understand. Each of these revenue streams has a bill filed that would remove this as a potential revenue stream?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct. That, along with some others, we just found out about the pre-file bills. There is one for homestead exemption, raising that exemption from $7,500 to $12,500. So that would further deplete the property tax because it would raise the value of the exemption. There is also a Senate bill that would increase it by $22,500. So the value of the exemption would be up to $300,000. So you would lose the property tax from $75,000 to $300,000. So we have IGR working with certainly the delegation, our delegation in Baton Rouge, but they're coupled with the bills that are listed here. Two of the bills result in $22 million loss in general fund revenue alone. That's food and drugs.
Right.
The exemption on those. We also have, as Gilbert mentioned on the soap sales, they're trying to convert from tax sales to tax lien certificates, meaning you will not be able to sell right away. We understand, there is a redemptive period, but there is a move away from soap sales of adjudicated property. And individuals will be able to purchase those liens for those delinquent taxes, but you also have to hold those liens for a certain period of time. That would mean the city would no longer be able to liquidate those properties for delinquencies. So that is another loss of revenue.
Is there any sense, look, I know with legislative bodies, particularly after serving in one, that things aren't a certainty, but after what happened with the amendments failing, do these become more likely to pass? We don't know yet.
Right.
The outlook is trying. We just don't have any clue
We don't.
where they stand yet.
We do.
Everything's on the table.
Right.
Right. Yeah, again, this is now, I think, the third time I've asked for this. I'm looking across the dais like, we are happy to go to Baton Rouge and talk to people about this and work on this with other delegations. I think the other thing that would be important is New Orleans, and I just don't know the answer to this, is New Orleans an outlier in any of these being as high as it is? And so if it affects us alone, that's one strategy as opposed to 63 other parishes where it affects them to a significant degree. It may not be as much as ours, right? But if it affects other municipalities, that'd be important.
Absolutely. The food and drug exemption will impact us equally across parishes because the other municipalities rely on the taxability of food for home consumption as well as certain prescription drugs just as much as New Orleans does. So it is, depending on certainly their collections, it would be a substantial loss to those municipalities. And I think that's why it was fought so hard in the special session. So those things that did not succeed in the special session have come up once again in this fiscal session, as we reported in the February meeting. We have to pay attention, but there are new things that have come up, especially on the homestead exemption side,
Okay.
which would erode the property tax collections.
And I'm going to ask an even harder question, which I think there's much less certainty for. At the federal level, everything changes almost on a minute-by-minute basis, much less on a daily or a monthly. Is there a plan that cities are using to address that together, or is it just sort of, we don't know what's going to happen? There definitely seems like there's, for example, it says brick is being cut. Well, that's a significant program that New Orleanians use, even if it maybe isn't tied to the budget, still homeowners use it. Just wasn't sure if there was sort of a game plan or a playbook for that.
Yes, I'll speak a little bit in the abstract. We have a working group and team specifically on this, headed by Dr. Avegno and Greg Nichols, who have a significant amount of federal funding. And then each agency is providing day-to-day information. Currently, we have not heard of any grant affected by any of the items. That doesn't mean that we're not thinking or we just have not had any direct, or I haven't, or my office hasn't, any direct information that there has been a cut or a change in our grants. Currently, our granting totals are significant. 1 year is up to $450 million, and if you look in aggregate over the multi-year grants, they get close to like $8 billion. They're significant. So we are very leaned in and listening. Other cities have asked us to enjoin in potential lawsuits. I can't speak as intelligently to that. I think law is looking into that portion as part of that working group, but I know that there are cities that are banding together depending on what they are impacted by, but currently we are not directly impacted, to my knowledge right now, of any specific grants. We've had to make some changes to some of our language for grant reimbursements, but nothing that, once again, I'll say that I know of, or anyone at the table knows of that I'm aware of, has directly impacted our bottom line.
Okay, good. That's good news. I mean, something, candidly, I thought that's unpredicted at this point, and let's just keep on crossing our fingers. Yes,
Okay.
Sam.
No, I'd like to add something for Councilmember Thomas, a question that you posed on the revenue side. Act 718 impacts the phase-in of property tax assessments when the quadrennial assessment occurs, if it's more than 50%. So we don't realize that income right away. It's phased in over a three-year period. So that would impact, the revenue that we would receive. Okay.
I'll try to speed this along. I know that some of this information is verbose. Do you want to highlight the funding uncertainty and increased costs that we know of right now? And most of these are generated as a result of the January 1st attacks compared to budget. You'll see that the ice storm unprecedented cost us an additional $2.38 million, and then the enhanced security for Super Bowl, Sugar Bowl, and Mardi Gras post January 1st went above budget by those. We were hoping and anticipating an emergency declaration for reimbursement. That never happened, and that never came through, so we will be factoring that into our costs this year. Just wanted to highlight that. The second portion, I think, is a positive movement and opportunity and speaks to our financial integrity, is our recommended solution. I know we're working closely with council and Councilmember Giarrusso and his staff to pay off the judgment list that has long lingered for significant amounts of years, if not decades. So what we are recommending, of course, as of April 7th, the city owes approximately $88 million on the unpaid judgment list, following several meetings with advisors, CAO's office, finance, council. The consensus recommendation is to sell 2 tranches of revenue bonds, 1 tranche in '25 and 1 in '27, with a debt secured by the millage rate for municipal purposes. Going back to that millage rate, and the bond proceeds would be used to pay judgment creditors on the judgment list pursuant to the ordinance. The new debt service payments would be structured in a way that current annual appropriation for judgments would not need to be increased due to the current debt being paid off between now and 2030, reducing existing debt service payments as the existing debt rolls off. So I think we have a very malleable and good solution to address almost $100 million of decades and decades of judgments, and we're going to do it essentially without increasing our general fund appropriation for the past judgments anyway, to be able to pay this debt service. So this is, I feel like, intelligent ways of using financing tools to be able to address long-standing problems.
So Gilbert, can I just interrupt for a second? So let me maybe try and make it a little bit simpler. Right now, the city basically allocates $2 million per year to pay judgments. And there were judgments that were totaling between $30 to $35 million. And then we learned of 2 other judgments that jumped that number up to $90 million. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the general alimony millage as collateral to essentially sell 2 buckets of bonds that will pay down the $88 million to zero. And the way that we're paying that is with the $2 million that we annually allocated, we, the city and the council, to paying judgments every year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I mean, that just seems like a super reasonable way and in line with what the laws that we pass together would be. And the goal then would be, obviously, the city will likely have some additional judgments, but we know that by the end of 2027, we will have enough money on hand to pay off the judgments that are on the list right now, and that total $90 million, and take that number down to as close to zero as possible.
That's correct.
Man, that's a pretty good day at the office.
So the next section is really going to focus on solutions that we're trying to address, whatever potential budget shortfalls we have to adhere to, and maintaining, once again, that $133 million savings and reserve fund, as well as potential unknowns. One-time revenues, the 25 official REC forecast does not account for one-time revenues potentially in 2025. And I'll be candid, I am probably more optimistic about some of these than Matthew is, and you know, I'll keep my optimism, but I also will hear and adhere to his perspective and what he sees in his calculations. So future revenue opportunities are Sewage and Water Board. Potentially, I know that I just finished saying they gave us $183 million. We give them $183 million, but they are supposed to reimburse us $11 million this year. We do have a real solid plan for the amnesty and unpaid traffic program, with some serious teeth associated with it with the Office of Debt Recovery and some vendors that are helping to address that. We hope to foresee somewhere in the $18 million. That's not cash yet, but that is just early estimates to be able to recover all the outstanding and unpaid bills. We hope and anticipate potential additional funding from Super Bowl and other new revenues from EMS and NOBC. I know you all thankfully passed a change to the EMS ordinance that we hope will bring an additional $10 million per year to EMS. I know those conversations are still ongoing, and nothing is in the REC yet related to it, but did want to highlight those from a optimistic perspective. This goes into a little bit more of the amnesty program. I'm happy to go through it in detail. I know that Austin had sent you all a letter giving a little bit more information associated with it, but to respect everybody's time, I will let you all read slide 26 on the specificity of the program, and I know Austin's here to answer any questions should you have that. So the next step is that the CAO's office and the Department of Finance have been assessing the city's financial status over the last several months to determine a path forward. The Department of Finance completed accruals for 24 revenues and expenditures and are reconciling preliminary numbers and identifying issues impacting 25. CAO's office held meetings with the public safety agencies. Those are really your big cost drivers for our budget on their use of overtime. And whereas we had previously provided, especially for NOPD carte blanche, NOPD overtime and whatnot because of the crime issues that we were having. Now to go into a little bit more managed methodology seems to make sense now that we are trying to align our reoccurring to reoccurring. The administration, we proposed some bond propositions to the council. One of the things that we have built into the 25 budget is capital expenses using operating dollars. I will highly encourage council that we shift those funds from operating to bond to capital dollars at any point we possibly can. I think if we just look at what was currently appropriated in the budget amendment, that could alleviate almost $23 million if we just shift to capital funds, should the voters support the capital program moving forward and vote affirmatively to it. It seems like a non-issue if we just shift the type of funding that is going to capital programs. And that will help us out specifically in this year for the future of the bond sale. And obviously, I will talk about the, I think I just talked about the judgment list on that last bullet in the previous slide. And obviously, spending reduction is going to be tantamount as we look to correct future uncertainties and current deficits. Budgets are evolutions throughout, and I talked to a little bit of the specificity of our projection analysis that we're undergoing, and obviously that reducing overtime and ensuring that external agencies, specifically, you saw in the previous slide deck, we increased in aggregate $100 million to external agencies. Sometimes what we are noticing is that external agencies will come and ask for additional funding, but they're sitting on significant fund balances. So we are going to hopefully work with the council to require them to spend down the fund balance before they're asking for additional dollars from the city. Since we are a pay-as-you-go entity, it doesn't make sense for an external agency to hold a significant, I'm not opposed to some small reserve to address for maintenance issues, but it shouldn't be multiple millions of dollars. So we'd like to lean in and really work with you all to do that. And then secondly, we'd like to audit our departmental audit, other operating pieces associated with that, and really evaluate hiring non-essential, non-revenue producing positions, assess if there's any cost savings now that we are in sustainment with the consent decree, and better develop cost-sharing arrangements with our partners, entities, whether it be Sewage and Water Board or the like.
Yeah, I wanted to say that before you moved on. Spending reductions, that's important if you're talking about balancing and saving in the future. Is it just overtime? Is it unfilled positions? What other categories so the public will know, especially since it's no question about saving money? What are some of the other categories, and how did you assess them? And what makes the determination what will make the determination that we can save money in those areas?
I think that is going to have to get a little granular with each specific department. I think where we have the most...
As an example is, and not to say, the police department with overtime, the fact that we're spending a lot of money on recruitment, and recruiting isn't going anywhere. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to keep spending money on recruitment, and recruiting isn't going anywhere, what happens to that money? Could it better be utilized someplace else, north, school kids, or how do we make those adjustments, and where do they come from?
Yes, I think we do them in a very communicative sort of way with the director or the chief, and we use our we all have really smart people that work for us in our departments, and we allow them, the ability to go and read and assess if KPIs match what they say they are, if they're not recruiting and they have X amount of people.
Because the tendency is, especially government agencies, they're going to ask for the same or more anyway, even if they're reserves or even if they don't need it at that particular time. And we have a lot of needs where we could utilize those funds in the now.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And also for new positions, we're evaluating, I think we will lean heavier on revenue producing positions and try to, the ones that create money, and I use EMS as an example because that is a significantly revenue producing agency. every year or every month we spend money on Acadian, which is the supplement, we are losing money and revenue from the city. So although it may cost us a little bit to invest in more paramedics or pay them a little more, in the long run, those are revenue-producing entities or positions that will, one, alleviate the cost for the Acadian ambulance, but also, secondly, be able to bill the insurance companies more.
But I think it's going to be important, you use the word, to get granular, especially during the next budget hearing, so we can take a look at those areas.
Yes, sir.
That's going to be critical. Thank you for that.
I have a, sort of bootstrap comment to that. So one of the things on the agenda today that we haven't moved through are a series of motions on new hiring rates or new positions. And so on the one hand, we're saying we all need to be responsible actors, and we don't have manna from heaven anymore from the federal government. At the same time, we need to increase spending for certain positions, and we need to create new classifications. So if we're doing that, we're going to increase the expense side. What are we doing then on the revenue side, or the other expenses that are being deleted as a result of these requests for additional employees?
Yeah, I think our position as an administration now is, I believe that civil services is in the process of conducting a full evaluation of compensation. And a lot of what you have presented before you are kind of one-offs from various departments for specific positions. And they're probably valid and important, but where I think we need to stay is let's see what civil service comes up with in the sense of their compensation study before we start approving one-offs, so that we can stay in a cohesive, their solution may be in anticipation of what is already being addressed. I think that's what you were asking, our position on some of those civil service requests, but maybe I misunderstood your question.
Well, I guess, look, I'm just trying to put my cards on the table, is I feel like what we're all saying is we need to change our way of thinking, because we no longer have this influx of ARPA money, and the way some things were budgeted conservatively have evolved over the years. We have a series of motions here, 14A through N, that are for new hiring rates, new classifications, salary increases, and so I just want to make sure that we're not holding these captive and not voting on them, but at the same time, there's money available to make these things happen. So I don't want to cut off my nose to spite my face, right? I don't want to be penny wise and pound foolish, but at the same time, I think the responsible question to ask is there money for these positions, or should we be holding off on any of these until we get the complete pay plan from civil service?
I don't want to be completely binary and say, yes, hold off, because
Sure.
there may be one off that absolutely makes sense, but I think our recommendation is let's wait for the entirety before we start approving some of those one-offs. And I'll look at my table, and I think that is what we were discussing. We can work with the one-offs where they are absolutely vital, but I think from the comprehensive structure, we'd rather wait and hold and see what the compensation study does provide.
My view is it's your job to manage and execute, so we'll take our cues from you. Again, my plan would just be to bypass today 14A through N, unless there's specific one-or-ones that you want us to pass.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Unless, did
All right.
you want to add?
Right.
Or you,
Okay.
You want to?
Well, just to add to what Gilbert said, and to speak to what you're saying, as we said earlier, we have to reprioritize. We have to consider thoughtful spending. If we are considering those increases for staff for retention purposes, absolutely, because we want to make sure that the efficiencies remain or improve. And if that is the way we're doing that, I think we should lean in. But we also have to consider the balance, right? So of the things that we've put in that have been appropriated for the fund balance, we may have to cut back on some of those things to accommodate this expense.
Look, Councilmember Thomas and I've had this conversation many times. I am the consistency is what the hobgoblin of small minds. Well, that's where I live, right? And so I just want to be consistent in the fact that
All his property is there.
right. I mean, listen. I think my colleagues will say I just want to be consistent. If the consistent message is we all need to have a better global plan about what spending looks like writ large, then I think we need a plan for the hiring and the classifications and making sure the administration both is not handcuffed by us not passing certain things, because I don't want that to happen.
Right.
And at the same time, we're not spending prodigiously, and then we come at the end of the year and the next administration has a huge hole in their budget because of personnel costs of running away from it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Just a couple more slides. So the opportunities for revenue generation, and we have some things on this list, obviously, that are going to need significant community communication, council support, buy-in, stakeholder buy-in, but it's important for us to at least put them and discuss opportunities for revenue. So I use that qualifier before I start. So some of the initiatives have a potential to generate revenue for the city and evaluated where feasible. So as I mentioned, invest in those revenue generating positions such as parking officers, tow truck drivers, EMTs, paramedics, sales techs, auditors. Grass cutting costs to the tax bill, that's something we've thrown around for several different years. Leveraging underutilized public assets. I think I've always tried to evangelize that the assets portion of our balance sheet is woefully underutilized, and we have some incredible properties that, should they be put into the private sector and leveraged, and we have some, foreseeable commitment to provide funding to the city, those vacant buildings just should be more utilized than they currently are. Reliance on Acadian Ambulance, I mentioned, and review special fund opportunities for non-general fund review. Hypothetically, if work is being done to address STRs, it should be charged to the STR account and not general fund if it's very specific, myopic, legally binding work. And then, of course, evaluate the fees to defray operational costs, especially those that are significantly outdated. As you mentioned, the sanitation fee, healthy homes fee, permit fees, and replace millages and parcel fees, such as street and traffic control devices, police, fire, and perhaps economic development. None of these are new. I know there's probably great debate and contention on all of them, but we also think that at some point we may want to lean in a little bit more closely and figure out how we can move the city forward with some of those increases.
Mr. Chair and Mr. CAO and the members who are there, if I may, I guess I could have pressed my button. That would have been easier. Look, we're talking long-term and we're talking global. I just want to mention in the area of opportunities for spending reduction that one day, whoever is in the position that you all are in, and maybe you'll be in that position, whoever might be elected, it might be someone from this council, it might be someone else. I just want to emphasize that we spend, in my opinion, an inordinate amount of money on issues that are state issues. I've gone through that, and I guess, to tell you the truth, decades. Yesterday was a good example. I'm changing the subject, but I'm on the subject. Yesterday, members of the police department, the health department, the Office of Homeless Services and Strategies showed up, and over a number of hours were in place because of an unfortunate development. But those encampment cleanups that take place are always on state property, and no one says anything. I look to the members of the media. No one says that. When we're talking about the revenues that the city spends on other responsibilities that are separate from us, and we talk about the deficits that we have, someone, and it may have to go to the next administration, has got to look at the amount of money that we spend maintaining state thoroughfares. Claiborne Avenue is a state thoroughfare throughout our entire city. So is Chef Highway. So is Elysian Fields from Claiborne to Gentilly. So is St. Claude Highway. In other areas,
the municipalities do not maintain state thoroughfares. That means that they take care of lights, they take care of crime prevention, they take care of general maintenance. And here in the city, over the years, we've gotten used to doing things that come under someone else's responsibility. Looking forward, in terms of spending reductions, we have to, in my opinion, put a bullet, create the path where the state handles its own responsibilities and allows the city to handle its municipal responsibilities. We can't ignore all of the work that we do relative to EMS, police, fire, sanitation on property that is under the jurisdiction of the state of Louisiana. Because then on the other hand, we don't own and can't really generate the revenues that we need from a Superdome or convention center or Port of New Orleans, but we put out money in a city that is constantly saying that there are new challenges coming ahead. So to whatever extent we can look at it, and if the Inspector General is watching, I've asked about that before, and we'll wait until maybe a new administration, but we can't ignore that because we're looking global and long-term at the asterisk that we put there. What could be a spending reduction would be not spending money on state responsibilities.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you.
Just before you go, Mr. Hackman, I see you sitting in the audience. Since we're not voting on the motions, you need to go do something else. You're more than welcome to. Just don't want to keep you here unnecessarily. Thank you.
All right, the last slide, the path forward. This financial snapshot, I hope, presents an opportunity for the city to make appropriate adjustments, but should also assure the public that our financial position is stable. Through continued responsible fiscal stewardship and strategic planning, the city can ensure structural balance through 25 and heading into 26. Going forward, regular coordination and communication around the city's financial data and its implications will be critical. The administration hopes to partner with the City Council to identify opportunities for spending reductions, explore options for revenue generation, and develop and implement long-term fiscal solutions. And I'll add a bullet that you mentioned, Councilmember Druso, help defend the city against some of the state actions that we're worried about. The REC may need to take and make adjustments to recognize appropriate revenue conditions, and budget ordinances may be adopted to adjust the 25 budget accordingly. Thank you for the time of the presentation, and we're happy to address any questions that had not already been asked by the body.
The last slide says there's budget stability. So I think we can all agree that's a good thing. Maybe I have to have lawyers here to ask this question, but one of the things that was discussed with the school board settlement is that the city would be making a different offer to the school board members. That hasn't been communicated to us. So has there been a new offer? Given that the financial situation is stable, has there been an offer made to the school board?
I'm not aware, but I would defer to law and legal on that particular question.
I mean, I just, look, I would like somebody to get me an answer to that, because my understanding of this situation, putting aside the legal arguments, and I don't want to get into those publicly, I don't think that helps either of us, was that part of the reason for not doing the deal is that we had a financial crisis. Well, that is settled now. And then the second thing is that there was going to be an attempt to do something different. And so I think it's reasonable to ask, what is the difference? And I think it's also fair to know that before we have to go to court next week, too. So it would seem to me that the announcements were made at the end of January or early February. We're now in the middle of April. This would be pretty easily knowable by everybody at this point. And if there has been an offer, I just think it ought to be communicated. So can I just, I don't know, I want to speak for everybody else on the committee, but I would hope to get an answer to that by, tomorrow's Good Friday. Like Monday, can we get an answer to that on Monday before we have to go to court? Okay. Is there anybody else? Again, I don't want to harp on this, but I think I do appreciate the amount of work that was put into this. And again, the fact that through working together, to me, there's two things. One, there isn't a financial crisis or an imminent cliff that prevents us from doing business right now. And then number two, I think, and this is something I think Ms. Samuel will agree with, that given the fact that the world has changed from where we were a year or two ago, we have to change with it. And so we're just going to have to be mindful of both growing what our revenue looks like and looking at our expenditure side more closely than we had to in years past.
I agree, and that's what we presented at the previous meeting, the thoughtful spending. We have to pivot, and it's time to take a look at what we do have on the books, the obligations.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I think, for example, raising EMS when it hasn't been raised, one of the questions I would have too is if there are things that haven't been raised in 5, 7, 10 years, like we really need to have that conversation. I mean, if there's a fee that has been untouched for a long period of time, it's unreasonable that we're charging $2,003 fees for now 2025. And so those probably ought to catch up and get to revenue. And obviously, if we can look at revenue sources that are being under-collected, I think that would help too. I mean, whatever we can do on the cameras in particular, I mean, I think the number was something like close to $130 million. I realize there's 18 million, so we're slightly more than 10%. But if we can even get to like 30 or 40%, that fills the gap completely. So I think I'd be interested, my just personal view is what are the revenue sources for which there are wide gaps in what's been collected, and then what can we do on those gaps? And then the second one would be where there's revenue we're leaving on the table that we understand what needs to be raised. And then third, not part of this presentation, but I think also merits conversation, is making sure while we're trying to be smart about spending, that safety and permits is given a very hard look, because that ought to really be the profit center for the city in terms of departments, and that if that is running efficiently and robustly, then it means the city's making as much money as possible. And I'm open to entertaining any other ideas, but those seem kind of like 3 or 4 kind of real low-hanging fruit ones that we can do to move things forward. Anybody else? Yes, Councilmember Green. You mind hitting your button?
I have an idea.
Yes.
The state of Louisiana owns the Superdome, owns the port, owns the convention center, owns City Park. What about the idea of some revenue sharing? It was called back then by the mayor a fair share. I'll go on and be controversial, if you will. We expend monies from the city's budget on state responsibilities, and we aren't given an opportunity, though we are the centerpiece of Louisiana, to share in the revenues generated by the major developments in our city. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, and I don't know if you said the port and the Smoothie King, but our cash cows are not, the money's not coming to the city. The port, the Smoothie King, the convention center, and the Superdome, that's always been something that kind of baffled me in this role, is that how little, if any, revenue we get from our cash cows of the city.
But that's an age-old
Yeah.
discussion. I
What-
mean, from
can I
his
correct something?
grandfather to now. It's
So in the-
fair share.
You might say that we get some.
We get some,
Some.
right.
You know where I'm going with that.
Absolutely, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. We have begun to get sales tax revenue on events at the Superdome. That happened in the previous administration, at the end of the previous administration. We do not collect sales tax on athletic events, but concerts and things of that nature, we have started to get sales tax revenue from ticket sales.
Yeah, but
No
Ron-
concessions.
You'll be wrong. Many of those things we used to get was negotiated out.
Sure.
That used to go to the health department, I think, the welfare
Right.
department, the recreation department.
Correct.
So we lost revenue in accommodating the state, and especially with those facilities that were built to entice the growth and development that you thought, or we thought, would benefit everyone in the city.
Absolutely.
And increasingly, we've been more of a pass-through, especially as how it affects or doesn't affect the people who live here, because we generate enough money inside our parish, if they would let us keep what we generate,
Right.
we wouldn't have to ask them for anything.
Absolutely.
right.
And the mayor has done an exceptional job of the
They
lost
ought to
penny.
write that.
Of the lost penny. There was an exemption because we had the state facilities in Orleans Parish, that there was a penny exemption off hotel motel. So we were able to get the lost penny, it's called, and that has generated, quite a bit of revenue that was brought back to the city by the mayor.
And I applaud that.
Absolutely.
The city of, we don't own City Park, we don't own the Superdome, we don't own the Convention Center, we don't own...
agree with you.
I know you agree. I'm just making it clear that there is so much revenue on the table, and I know that it can be controversial, and depending on how the media spends it or the Inspector General spends it, I'm looking for a cooperation. But I tell you, I don't like to see the constant looking at how we can do things that are going to take revenue away from the city of New Orleans while we don't look at what we can do to generate revenues from the city of New Orleans, because we are the centerpiece of the fund, of the revenue raising of our city in many respects. So in the most pleasant way that I can put it, but I still know that somebody's going to call me and say, you're always trying to create some tension. Oh, I am not. I'm trying to create more smooth operations involving the state and the city, but we can't ignore, as we walk around our city and we see all of the tourists come in, because our police department is doing an outstanding job, because our EMS workers are doing a great job, because our health department is doing a great job, because those who work for the city are doing a great job in many respects. We can't ignore the fact that there is a ton of revenue that we spend on state initiatives and that we don't get back from entities that are actually owned by the state of Louisiana. It's just, in general, what's the conclusion, Councilman Green? That we should be getting more.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right, thank you all very much. We appreciate it. Why don't we just do this very quickly, Mr. Cooper? You're at the
Yes.
table.
I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, I think really for me in the budget reports, the thing that's just needs the most attention is it looks like we're in the red on personnel right now. And so I want to make sure, again, just kind of keeping with everything, that we're watching that. And is it just early in the year, but according to the personnel projection, we're at a $64 million deficit. So
I believe that's a question for Ms. DeLarge.
Okay, all right.
We did address that a little bit in the presentation.
Okay.
So the refined methodology that has been used has given us some more accuracy, but we're working on a refinement again to those, the methodology at this time, but that's also given us an opportunity to determine where we need to curb some spending, talk to departments as well. So throughout the year, that number may actually go down as we're working on pieces.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page and there's no surprises, and we're in April right now.
What we didn't want to happen is the surprise we had last year, so we tried to pull all the stops out.
I agree.
Yep.
And I guess for Mr. Cooper, as I jump to number 15, is there anything good, bad, and different that we really need to know on the revenue side right now about where things stand?
Well, my boss over here is telling me to point out that as accruals have come in...
On slide 12.
Yes, on slide 12 of our previous presentation, that as accruals have come in, it had basically 2024 actual revenues ended within $3 million of my forecast. So
That's pretty close.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you all for your hard work on that. We appreciate that. But I think that's a testament to the good planning for what's happened so far. We appreciate that. All right, so I think we've gone over item 15. What I would urge the members is we just go through items through I guess 13 right now. Excuse me? It's different. All right.
Councilmember Jerusalem,
Yes.
we did send over the procurement updates
Thank
as
you.
well for you all.
Yeah, I just figured for everybody's sanity
Yes.
that we wouldn't cover at this meeting.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, we
Thank
appreciate it too. Thank you. Thank you all. Have a great weekend. All right, is somebody here on item 4? Okay. Thank you all for being here for the thorough presentation. Item 5, okay. Yeah. We'll get to 5 in 1 second. We got 4 coming up, and then 5. And I know I've deferred 5. I've deferred 5 a couple times. All right, so we're on item number 4 right now. All right, go ahead.
Good afternoon, members of
Good
council.
afternoon.
My name is David Munier, Affordable Housing Project Manager. So I'm here representing the Office of Community Development. In reference to this project, City of New Orleans and Winn-Dixie Phase 2 LP for City Square 162 Phase 2 rentals. Should I go over a brief summary, or do you just want to ask questions?
I think everybody, can you give me the headline version of what the summary is
So
outside
this
of obviously
is-
what's on the agenda?
Yes, so this is a development in the Treme neighborhood that will be 28 units of affordable housing. It's funded by $4.2 million of home federal funding, which is a federal housing specific funding source. That's
Okay, perfect. All right.
that's the brief version.
That's a perfect version. All right, we've approved item 2, we've covered item 3. I'll move for approval of item 4. May I have a second? Second. Yep, there you go. See if the machine can catch up for a second. Not doing it? All right. All in favor? Aye. 5 yeas, no nays on item number 4. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, the vote is in, so that's fine. I'd like to ask a question, just because I could look it up. What is the total value of this development? The total price?
I have a representative from the developer here. Would you mind if she speaks?
My machine isn't even working.
26 million?
$26 million, yes.
It's for 45 units?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, item number 5 is up next. I think I deferred this item on the last 2 council meetings, so I knew there was an issue or two about this, so I'm not necessarily married to moving this forward, but I do want to hear from people. Have a comment card? Want to come forward?
I had Mr. Chairman, I put a comment card for 3 as well.
Yeah, but we don't, so here's the thing.
You don't do that?
Yeah, we're just trying to be careful about the rules, because what we found is that people come here and make non-germane comments on non-voting items, so
Okay.
take a harder line about if it's a voting item, you got your 2 minutes. If not,
Okay, well, I'll just share some information on
Right.
finances. I hope CA would have heard these as well. So we own Lincoln Beach. It's a local investment compared to the state-owned properties. If you invest in areas like New Orleans East, where they have city-owned property surrounding it, then you invest in New Orleans instead of keep investing in areas that have state-owned property with city money. So I urge you all to make Lincoln Beach investment a priority. Lincoln Beach does not cost money, it draws money. As well, it's a revenue generator. It is my object to really see it's important to show the money and where it went and where it's planned to go. I really would like to be transparent, request Lincoln Beach financial accounting, a report from the CEO office. I thank Joseph Dredd for communicating with us information that's real helpful for us to understand the process. Any city council resolutions, funding history, expenditures, and projections. We had to work in the past that Garden Plaza funding was a priority, and $5 million was moved from Lincoln Beach to fund Garden Plaza. We definitely support Garden Plaza funding, but it was a shock to us that funds were taken away from Lincoln Beach, and it brings anxiety to the priorities that the city faces now, that it's possible that Lincoln Beach funding could be de-appropriated. And just would like to see in the 2025 FY25 budget, where's Lincoln Beach funds, a line item. I didn't see that anywhere in the presentation. As they mentioned, Six Flags, which is Bayou Phoenix, and Charity, I was born at Charity, which is two-lane. I wish they would have named Lincoln Beach. They really need to name that project. We have a meeting in May 6th, public meeting that's important, that is information. We have other meetings, 6 amendments on the table, a construction contract's coming out. We didn't know where the money at, and we need receipts and documentation on that. If I get those receipts,
Thank you. Councilmember Thomas, you wanted to make a comment before Mr. Burnside?
Yeah, no, just for the public. In the meeting that we had, I think Mr. Threat and the team representing, as well as the mayor, said that the funding was there. It was a matter of priority and phasing in the project. So it's with all expectations that once we get to the point where how they're going to prioritize how the area is developed, whether it's a passive park, get the utilities, but no one has told us yet, not in any meetings, that the funding isn't there or won't be there. So that was the last thing we got from the public meeting, unless someone is lying.
I'm not saying no one's lying. I'm saying information is transparent and documentation so we can read that for ourselves. I didn't say anyone's lying at all or saying money wasn't there. It's transparency so I could be confident in the reports of the public, the exact document.
Can you turn the microphone back on? I just want to make sure we can all hear you. So whoever's working the mic.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
I was not inferring that funds were not there. There's been funding for the project in different aspects coming from different sources. It's clarity and transparency. It's important that the community and stakeholders know exact amounts that's in the funds budget. Like I say, it brings me anxiety because the city has priorities. In the past, $5 million was defunded, deappropriated to fund Garden Plaza payout, and we worked to make sure those funds were reallocated. I can't be at these meetings every day. I have a job. I sat through this, and it happened before I have anxiety. It could happen again because there are serious priorities in the city, and I just want to make sure we have our funds in a receipt that I can show people that this is the exact funds that we have exactly. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Burnside?
So, my name is Mike Warwick Burnside. I live at 2215 Felicity Street here in New Orleans. I came in today, even though I don't normally come to committee meetings for a particular purpose. A person asked me to come, so I came. That person's not here now. I'm sure that the person in question can watch on television if they feel like it. I have a lot of problems, some of which are your fault, quite frankly, and some of them are not your fault at all, and some of them are a mix. So I'm going to risk germanity and point out something that I wished I had a chance to point out earlier, and I may be stopped, but I think it's important enough to run the risk. I like numbers. I can no longer see the number 6 or the number 7. I have brain problems, so what I'm going to say now could be my fault, and I would appreciate it if somebody politely explained that to me. On page 11, the previous speaker's handout, we have 2024 unaudited actuals, 2024 revenue asterisk, $805,320,201. On page 13, on the same handout, we have a column. It's titled Actual Revenues. There are 4 dates given, one of which is 2024. The cell that allegedly is 2024 actual revenues is $765,937,735. I would like to know why they are not the same number. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Burnside. All right. Members, do we want to move number 5 forward? I know I've deferred it a couple times on the council agenda. I don't see a reason not to, but if anybody had any consternation, I wanted to entertain that. All right, I've moved, seconded by Vice President Moreno. My screen is keep on getting delayed, Donna. I'm a yay. Everybody else, yay. Are 5 yays, no nays on item number 5. Item number 6, been asked to defer. Item number 7, is there somebody here? Brandy, is all these stuff that you all want to talk about really quickly? I mean, this is a transfer. What's that? Okay. So 7 and 8 are us. So this is transferring $1 million from IGR to the general fund operating budget within CAO. So I'll move. What's that? 8 is Thrive, and 7 is Youth Force NOLA. So Mr. Burnside, you want to speak on number 7 and number 8? But why don't we go 7 first, then we'll get to 8. So as Councilmember Morel kind of said to me, this is the council passing continued parts of the OPSB budget. And I guess what I would ask is that all items that we vote on today be added to the consent agenda except for items 7 and 8. Mr. Burnside?
Yeah. I'm not having an answer to my previous question. I shall make a couple more somewhat generalized comments. The numbers that appear in the handout of which we are not speaking would tend to suggest that next year we're going to have to cut approximately $130 million from our budget. It seems that Thrive Kids is a priority. I have been in this chamber while Thrive Kids presented, and I will understand the elected individuals on the days support Thrive Kids. The question stands, however, that if one uses the numbers given to us on page 11, that the 2024 expenditures were $929 million, and the 2024 revenue was $805 million. Understanding that our restricted funds and non-restricted funds, neither of these is limited to either. They seem, although they do not say, to be totals. If in fact we are not going to spend $130 more million next year than we spent this year, is there any commentary from anyone as to why we are funding something that quite frankly should be funded by the school board, which does, after all, have its own revenue stream? Thank you very much.
Yeah, my answer is it's because of the settlement. And since we're going to follow the, and let me finish, because we made a deal with the school board, we're going to honor the deal. That's what the deal requires. So I mean, we passed the first 10 million, we passed the second 10 million, we've rescinded the collection. So the answer to your question is because this is what the deal requires, we're honoring the deal. And the same thing for number 1.
No, I respect the fact you answered, and I'm grateful. Whether I agree or not doesn't matter anymore. Sure. I appreciate the fact you're elected. I appreciate the fact that you matter. Thank you for answering.
Thank you, Mr. Burnside. Actually, Ms. Spears and Mr. Aguilar, I'm going to countermand my last instruction. Everything should just go on the consent agenda. We'll just make it easy for everybody. So I've moved on item number 7, or Councilmember Morel did. I'll second. All in favor? Aye. 5 yeas, no nays. Item number 7 passes unanimously. Item number 8 is calendar number 35977-978. This is, as Councilmember Morel said, the other part, which is now Thrive Kids. Mr. Burnside, I have a card for you, so I want to make sure if you wanted to speak on this, you have the opportunity, sir. So again, for clarity, item number 7 is Youth Force NOLA pursuant to the settlement. Item number 8 is Thrive Kids.
I guess I don't make this often clear when I come here. Whether I agree with you or not, I respect you.
That's,
You, not as an individual you, as a plural you, as a council. It matters greatly, because without you, we just have a dictatorship. So how we're going to be spending money is going to become much more contentious, God help me, contentious, because of course we'll have less money to spend. I will point out the numbers that are provided to us on page 13 would suggest to us that actual revenues have decreased between 2023 and 2024. If we are to believe the numbers given to us, we pulled in $11 million less money on the year Taylor Swift came to New Orleans than we did the previous year. $12 million less revenue. So not only are we going to spend less because we're not going to spend ARPA money, we're going to have less because less is going to come in. So what's going to happen is we're going to push the bond button. And when we do that, I and you are going to part company, because I don't believe the bonds should be issued while the bonds are only paid for by half of the people in this city.
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Burnside. We haven't had an REC since Taylor Swift or since Super Bowl. So the estimates you're being given on us losing money on Taylor Swift, we actually don't have the data to prove that actually happened.
Oh, I misspoke.
Administration.
Sir, I misspoke if that's what I said.
Okay.
I apologize to you. I'm only using these numbers,
No.
and my reference to Taylor Swift was merely that this is the year in which she came. So I don't believe we lost money on Taylor Swift. I believe we lost money throughout the year, and without Taylor Swift, we would have lost more.
Okay. Thank you.
thank you. All right, so I'll move on item number 8. Second by Councilmember Moreno. My machine still isn't up, but we'll just say 5 yeas. There we go. 5 yeas, no nays on item number 8. I might use this one too. You want to sign me out? I'll just go here. Item number 9 is to pay a judgment. Is there anybody here from the law department on item number 9? Oh, wow. It's crazy.
Turn your mic off.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Chairman and members of the council.
So this ordinance is to provide $1 million for a federal judgment to Haney versus the city, and have with me Kevin Hill from the law department, who can give more information about the judgment.
This judgment is one that was probably one of the biggest ones in the media this year. It involves a New Orleans police officer that investigated a rape of a teen, and of course, some things happened there that we ultimately, that were investigated, but ultimately found the NOPD officer responsible for the crime that was committed. In fact, there was some evidence that supported the fact that he actually did it, and then at some point he did acknowledge that he had a relationship of some kind with the young lady that he was there to take a report for. We were able to settle this matter for $1.3 million, which we believe was a good judgment because, quite frankly, there were numbers that supported something far more than that. And of course, plaintiff counsel sought to get exponentially more than even that. We are asking for $1 million to meet an upcoming payment that we have on a different judgment that was already budgeted, but
because we found ourselves in a situation where the Haney judgment was due to be paid at the end of March and the funds were not there, we spoke with the budget office, and through a lot of wrangling and going back and forth, the conclusion was that you already have money that was sitting for the Floyd judgment, which is a judgment that was multiple years, and was ready to be, the money was already there to pay that judgment, rather than run the risk of being embarrassed by the court for not being able to pay the money because the money for the Haney judgment was not in place. The recommendation was that we seek to move the money, part of the money from the Floyd judgment over into the Haney line item in order to meet our deadline, which was at the end of March. March 31st is when that payment was due. So now, essentially, we found ourselves in a situation where, for the lack of a better way to explain, you rob Peter to pay Paul, now it's time to pay. And so we're asking that the council would pass an ordinance that would allow us to reimburse the $1 million that was taken from the Floyd judgment that we ultimately used to pay Haney, put that money back so that we can meet our deadline at the end of the month for a $1.7 million payment.
All right, I have a couple of clarifying questions. First is to Mr. Large. The money is supposed to come from Intergovernmental Revenue 6699. That's where we typically keep judgments?
No, this is a federal judgment. Federal judgments are paid from general funds, so we would process this the same way we would process like number 7 and number 8. So
Right.
we pull that from there. So the money is actually coming from general funds. Should be Fund 1000.
Okay, yeah, all right. So I just want to make sure that's clarified. My next question is, and again, I don't want to waive any privilege, but I didn't see this case on the memo we received from the law department. And I'm just saying, I expressed concern that I'm voting on something that we've specifically, and I realize, Mr. Hill, it's not you, so I want to be very clear about that, but we've asked for judgments and settlements of this size to be discussed, and maybe I missed it. I'll be the first to say that that's within the realm of possibility, but I'd like to know if I'm correct. If I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong, and if I'm correct, then why isn't it in the memo that we're supposed to be getting telling us about this?
Well, it would probably have been in either January or February, but if not, that would have been an oversight on our department. And if that is the case, we sincerely apologize that it was not there, but it was indeed a part, and should have been a part of the litigation portion of our report to the council.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at April. Let's see if I can find February. Just give me a second if you don't mind. And again, I'm not trying to air laundry publicly. I'm just trying to make sure we're on the same page. I don't see it in February either, so this is what I'm inclined to do. You're here, and I don't want to frustrate a federal judge and have them order, yes, I've been on the other side of that, and we don't want that to happen to anybody, but I guess the request, Mr. Hill, I'm making to you is, we've asked for these memos. I don't think it's too much to ask for that they have the parameters that we've asked for, and this isn't included, so somebody needs to dust that off and go back and look and make sure we're getting all the relevant information. With that, I'll move for approval on item number 9, seconded by Councilmember Moreno. Thank you for being here, sir.
My pleasure.
The rest of mine.
Need one more. Your yay, Councilmember Green's yay. There we go. 4 yeas, no nays. on item number 9. Item number 10, calendar numbers 8283. This is to appropriate funds to Department of Public Works and Parkways for a full roof replacement at Joseph M. Bartholomew Golf Course Clubhouse. Councilmember Thomas, do you want to move for approval on this one?
And this is not general fund uses, it's their fund balance from revenue from the golf course, for this to move forward.
Great.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Thomas. I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's 4 yeas, no nays. Thank you. All right, item number 11, 358485. This is to appropriate unspent grant funds from State Homeland Security Program to the Office of the Mayor for telecommunication equipment. It's a whopping $15,797. Mr. Burnside, you'd like to speak on this item, sir?
Mr. Burnside wanted to speak on the judgment.
I'm sorry. I apologize. Please go ahead and speak on that too.
All right, that's good.
I missed
No,
that
no,
part.
it's it. I'm not in a position to take anybody over the coals right now. My brain is pretty much gone. In regards to the judgment, I'm not in favor of bonds in general, and a lot of people are. And I'm not in favor of pretending somehow that when we secure this with the city's millage on general municipal purposes, that isn't taking away from the appropriation. That money is not there for us to appropriate anymore. So the red light income has been taken out of the income stream. The public belt rent has been taken out of the income stream. It's not just that we're spending money, we are not taking in money. And I would argue that this is the same thing. We're going to spend bonds to make good people that we should help at the cost of reducing our income stream. Our income stream is going to go down. Money doesn't come from nowhere. So to say it's not an appropriation, as was said at this table earlier, is not helpful to me. If you reduce an income stream, it is mathematically the same thing as if you had appropriated the money. And when you use bonds, obviously you pay interest on the bonds. Equally, obviously, you pay bondholders for functioning as professionals. And finally, of course, you are only using a subset of the taxpayers to pay it, namely those who actually pay the property tax. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, sir. All right, I move for approval on item number 11, seconded by President Morel. All in favor? Aye, for Council Members Green and Thomas. So 5 yeas, no nays on item number 11. Item number 12 is ordinance calendar numbers 86 and 87. This is to support the Health Department, advancement of the healthy food delivery to pregnant women. Moved by Councilmember Moreno, seconded by President Morel. All in favor? Aye. 5 yeas, no nays on item number 12. And our last voting item, except for adjournment, is item number 13, calendar numbers 89 and 90. And this is to appropriate grant funds from New Orleans Business Alliance, the Office of Workforce Development, to expand opportunities for entry-level positions and pathways. It's transferring $90,000. Moved by Councilmember Moreno, second by Councilmember Morel. Before we vote, Mr. Burnside, a comment. You're good? Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Burnside, for being here today and participating. All in support of item number 13? Aye. 5 yeas, no nays. Councilmember Green moves for adjournment, seconded by Councilmember Thomas. Hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. Thank you. We stand adjourned.
Same to you. Happy Easter, happy Bunny Day to everybody.